So last week we discussed the concept of we started the discussion on the concept of bias-variance trade-off. How it's a unique concept, a very important concept, because it affects our modeling in a way that is a little bit difficult or kind of challenging to get one off at the same time, or to eliminate all of them totally, but rather we try as much as possible, because they are usually on the opposing side. You try to reduce one, you are increasing the other. You try to reduce the other, you're increasing the opposite side. So that's why they are usually, the general status is we treat it as a trade-off. So where do you stop? You just have to lose some things. But then at what point do you stop doing that? So we started last week that to understand the concept of bias-variance trade-off, you must first of all understand the concept of generalization, which is after you train your model. So you expose your model, you expose the algorithm with the training labels. So that is training data set with labels. So that is done in the training process. Then once the training is done, we mentioned that you need to you give back those samples upon which you have trained your model. You need to give it back to the model you have trained to see, can it really understand some of the samples it has already been exposed to? And that is where the concept of training performance comes in. Training performance. You share the performance of the training you have done. Is he able to recognize what percentage of exposed sample, the sample that has been trained out, can he successfully identify? Once that is done, we move on to check for the testing performance. So testing performance. These are labels, these are samples that have been kept secret, kept away from the model during the training. It has never seen this before. So we want to see how much of recognition can your system generate or produce. Now, so when you put training performance and testing performance side by side, it speaks volume. And that is where you can see the concept of underfitting and overfitting came up, and we explained it much. That if you have performance, and to know if it is training set or testing set, as the case may be, just try to give us a brief overview. It depends on the kind of model evaluation you are using. We said there are two basic types, the holdout method. These two are known as holdout method. Holdout method, where you divide your data, you use some parts of your data set to train, and you hold out, you keep some away so that you use it for testing later. And then the division can be to 3, where you have training set, test validation set, and then the final testing set. You can also have only 2 sets, training set and testing set. As any of the 2 is fine. But if your data set is big enough, then it's better to have 3 partitions. But if your data is sizable, not too big, not big enough, you go for 2. And if your data is really small, then we go for the second method, which we call the cross-validation. All these we have described, we discussed them in detail in our previous 4 videos called Evaluation of Machine Learning Models. We can refer to that. However, now, either you use holdout method or cross-validation, whichever method you use, that's fine, depending on the problem you are modeling and the size of your data. However, the concept of bias variance came up when you have training set performance that is really high, and the testing set is also high, or the training set performance is poor, and the testing set performance also is poor. What is really happening to your system? What do you do? Where did you get it wrong? That was where the concept of bias variance actually came in. And then we explained that if your performance is very high, that means you have very small error. That is why when I'm talking about performance, the training performance, it means the error is very high. That means the percentage accuracy is very high. For example, you are working on the classification problem. But the one that is unique to both of them, either you are dealing with regression problem or classification problem, is the error. That's why people always talk about error. Error is the actual output minus the predicted output. How many mistakes is your system making? So if you're having 2% error, you know, that means you're having actually 98% accuracy. So this is the opposite. So when you know the error you are making, you can easily calculate the performance in the positive side. Now, and we also mentioned last time that the source of error are generally divided into two. We have the reducible error and the irreducible error, the error you cannot play with no matter what you try to do. So reducible error has to do with the bias and variance. We can try to shift, try to see how can we try to reduce the bias, can we try to reduce variance? We can try to play with it. However, for irreducible error, we say it comes from the data. There's nothing you can do about it when you are modeling, except you have to go back. You go back to the pre-processing stage and deal with your data. And that's why this principle, always remember, let the data speak. See, if your data is noisy, then your model might have a lot of errors. So the error might come from this. So there's no matter how powerful the algorithm, of course, that different capability of different algorithms depending on how they can model the noise and the likes. That's when we're going to talk about fuzzy logic modeling later, how fuzzy logic is a little bit powerful when it comes to noise modeling or ability to deal with noisy data. Now, for whatever is the case, let the data speak concept is very important. It always holds. So we pay attention to that. Now, so we say the generalization error, we covered the fact that bias is how much average model over all training set differ from the true model. Also, we discussed variance as how much model estimated from different training sets differ from each other. However, the easier way for us to identify them, quantify them, result in two very important terminologies, which we call the underfitting and the overfitting. So underfitting is when your model is too simple. It's not able to represent all the system, all the data. So it is characterized by high bias, low variance. Take note of this. See, high bias, low variance, whereas overfitting is when your model is too complex. In an attempt to run away from too simple, you ended up becoming too complex. So that's why you need to seek in between. At what point do I get into complexity that is not acceptable? You have to stop before you reach that place. That is the trade-off you have to make. So if it is too simple, you're going to be having high bias, which is low variance. And it is characterized by, how do I know this biasness? The model is having high bias. You check your training error. The training error is going to be high. And then the testing error is going to be high. It means both training and testing, they are bad. Nothing is good there because your model is too simple. It's not able to understand the relevant characteristics of the data set you have presented. So you need to do it again. Unfortunately, while you are trying to do it, people go into overkill. They try to overdo it again, and then it goes into complexity. You make it too complex. Like they always say, too much of everything is always bad. Yeah, we can have it here. If you make your model too complicated and I want to capture all the relationship in the data during training, then you end up fitting it into irrelevant characteristics or noise in the data. And this overfitting is characterized by low bias, high variance. You can see how it's always opposite. You can see as you are moving away from high bias, you want to reduce the bias to be very low, you move into this. This is low here, it becomes high. So at what point do we stop? So this is where the concept of the bias variance trade-offs comes in. And how do we know there is low bias? You check the training error. It's going to have low training error in the training, but high testing error. See, for example, here you train a model, you're having something like 30% for training set and maybe 25% for testing set. After training for a long time, your model is only able to recognize samples that it has seen before by just 30% accuracy. Which means the error is like 70% error. That's huge. If it's not performing on what it has seen before, how do you want it to perform on the one that is even totally new? This is the characteristic of underfitting. For overfitting, that's why underfitting is going to be clear, because your training performance is going to be bad and the testing performance will be bad. So you can easily know that, yes, I still need to do something. However, for overfitting, sometimes it could be deceiving. That's why we always tell people, don't just check your training performance and start celebrating. No, you need to wait until you see the performance of your testing set, because that's the actual thing we are interested in. So here you train your system, you have very low error. You have like, mashallah, you have like a 98, 99% accuracy, which means you have only one error. Low training error, 1% error, just 1%. However, when you test your model on the data set that you kept separate, the generalization was very bad. You only succeeded in having like maybe 54% error, which means you are able to have 46% accuracy. The performance is only good to 46%, and you're having 99 in training. We say this is overfitting. Your model has succeeded in memorizing the data. So when new data arrive, it's not able to generalize. And we are actually training our model to be able to generalize, so that when it sees new sample, that is the power of why we're actually training. Because when a client comes to you, they want to train a model that can predict if their product is good or not, or want to develop a model that can predict who is having diabetes or not. We want to predict with very low accuracy for new patients that are coming. See, with very low error, but high accuracy. So this is why we are more concerned with that particular testing result. And that is why the problem of overfitting is really a serious one. And then with this, describe variance, bias, how we can recognize it last time. And we give this example. See, this is an example of AI bias model. Because it is the model, this line is the model. It's too simple. See, it has only very few parameters. Life is very simple. Make it easy. Okay, that is overkill. You make it too simple. That is not good. This one is trying to run away from being too simple. It ended up making it too complicated. You can see it's trying to fix all model to this. So at the end of the day, you have it too complicated. You're going to have low variance, but very high, low bias this time around, very high variance. So running away from this, we don't want this. The appropriate one is this one. This is the correct model. You can see it here. This is the correct model. You can see that model is neither too simple nor too complex. This one is too complex. You want to make sure you follow the pattern of every data. Maybe some data sample could be noise or outlier, as we discussed in other areas. Now, we now say that what do we really want? See, we want something like moderate bias and also moderate variance, something that is acceptable. Is this achievable? We said this will have been the ideal situation. This is the ideal situation we always look for, actually. So that the error of prediction should be as less as possible. The models are accurate and consistent on averages, and they still perform acceptably well on different data sets. New samples will be correctly predicted as expected. This is what we're always looking for. So how low is low? We're going to mention it. But looking at, okay, because high bias is not good, it's underfitting, I want to get low bias. How low can you go? We can only talk of moderate. So trying to see an hypothetical example as we move on. What of low bias and high variance? The moment you have low bias and high variance, you know that you already have overfitting. Your model is too complex. You made it too complex and it ended up memorizing the data set. So when new samples arrive, it will not be able to recognize them. So we don't want this. But underfitting is the opposite, which is high bias, low variance. We also don't want this. See? We don't want this. So whereby both training set is not even good on training set, it's not even good on testing set. And like I said, it's easy to quickly recognize underfitting because you can see that both performances are very bad. However, often than not, when people see, in the case of overfitting, people check their training accuracy and they start celebrating. If I've had a case of someone who actually reported the training accuracy and then submitted it for review, I said, no, training accuracy is not what you check. Nobody take your training accuracy or training performance serious, because it could actually be overfitting. So yeah, you train your model, you are getting 99% accuracy. Sometimes you get 100% or 95%. It's good. I think that is a sign that your model is able to recognize the data set upon which it has been trained. I think that is good. In some cases, we have seen models that after the training, they got very bad performance. At least that's a good way to go. Oh, my model is performing on my training set very well. But then it's not the final. Until you bring in the testing set, which has been kept separated from the model, and then show it to the model, get the performance accuracy on this testing set, or holdout method, or holdout set, as the case may be, then you can then celebrate if you're able to get good results. But overfitting means you are not going to be able to get it. So we say it happens when you train your model over noisy data sets. So, or you try to make it overkill, so many parameters, and then it leads to a lot of problems that during the testing set is not able to recognize it. Yes, you have data, you have a kind of data, some data set are really big trouble. You have data here, you have data here during the training. Where this data, they're like ordinarily should have been cleaned up. They are too far away from the center, but some model will try to memorize all of them. So try to memorize all the data set. Now, when new samples are coming, all of them are coming here. So your model already spent energy over try to understand this extra stuff that's supposed to be kicked out before. You can see this kind of model might not be able to understand the new samples we are bringing, because the new samples are now falling in different space. So we rather have a model that will just do like this. You see, it passes through reasonable area. Even when you have new samples now, you can see that this kind of model will be able to take care of those new samples. So this case of trying to memorize all the data set that is available is characteristic of overfitting. So, and that is why if you train, it's better to compromise, as we are going to show you now, move on. So for the underfitting, it's high bias and low variance, which is the opposite. So it's not also good. Now, so the bias-variance trade-off, as we mentioned, these are the constituents of error generally. We have the noise, we have the bias, and then we have the variance. So we call this irreducible error or unavoidable error because it comes from your data, from the data set. There's nothing you can play with. You have to either go to your data set and try to make it better. Otherwise, it's going to be there. That's why they often call it unavoidable error. But however, these are errors due to incorrect assumption by high bias. You assume that the data is too simple, but meanwhile, the data is complicated. So you didn't go with the right algorithm. It's dangerous. Then you have variance. This error due to variance of training samples, as the case may be. Now, let's look at an hypothetical example of how the performance of the model changes. Because I know what comes to my mind, what could come to our mind is, then when do we stop the training? When do we know when to stop? Yeah, this is bias-variance trade-off graph. This is the error. You can see the error. We're checking the error. At this level, you have the high bias, you have low variance. As the complexity of your model increases, bias gets lower, but variance gets to be increasing. You can see that's why it's challenging. That's why the terminology is bias-variance trade-off. You have to make a trade-off. You cannot achieve zero any of the side, because as you move towards zero in the bias side, you are increasing the variance, which is also a problem, which is going to be adding another dimension to your error. Now, let's see. This is training error. So when we train our model, so we expose our algorithm to a new data set, we keep training. Usually the error starts from the top. So when you are training, there maybe a back propagation algorithm in neural network, you set up an error rate that needs to be checked. That you check the error. Okay, if the error is 0.05, or for example, then you can stop. So the system will train a little, check the error. That is the difference between the input, I mean the target value given, because during training, you provide the input and you also tell the system this is the output. You see, for this particular kind of image, this is tomato. The system will check, am I making a mistake or am I getting closer to it? It will keep training until the error is reduced. Or if I'm trying to predict the age of a patient or of a sample, in forensic investigation, they want to establish the age of the kind of maybe some crime took place and they took some parts of the remains of the people that were affected. Then they want to determine the age. Okay, want to predict the age. Okay, the age originally given during training was like maybe 39 for that particular sample. The system will try to reduce the error. The system predicted 36. It will compare it and see what is the error. The error is still far away. It will try to reduce it until it's satisfied. However, when you are trying to reduce it, where do we stop? If you want to get to 0, if the difference is 0, so that this is sample 1, 39. You make it to predict 39. Another sample is like 43. You made it also to predict 43. So your model ended up predicting everything beduct, 100% accurate. So by the time you calculate the error in all the samples for the training, you might end up having 100% accuracy, which means it's 0 error. This kind of system is dangerous because this is training set. You are making your system to fix it fully. No error. No, rather it's better to have a little bit of error. Otherwise, you can run into trouble. This is what we want to show here. Now let's look at it. This is testing error. This is testing error. So when you bring your data set for testing, the one that this is data set you're exposing both the target and then the system are exposed. However, for this one, this is the one that is kept extra, kept away from the machine. So which we call the testing set or validation set. You can see that as you are reducing your error in training, as the training error was reducing, because our aim in training is to reduce the error, it kept reducing. You can see also that the testing set kept going down. So maybe the error here was like, maybe the performance error was like 80%. Maybe this one was like a 76%. Or maybe 60 or 40, maybe 55%. Because you can trace the error here. This is error. So this one keep reducing. As you are reducing your training error, you are making your, because here is bias. High bias, the bias is really here. We want to get it down to low. See, which is underfitting. Here is underfitting. The error is high for training. The error is high for testing. You don't stop here because this is underfitting. Your model is not performing for both training and testing set. Here you can see the error is a little bit reduced. So it's also reducing. So as the training error kept reducing, you can see the testing set is going to be reducing. Now, I want you to notice something that happens here. You can see the error of the training set kept going until it reached 0. It reaches 0 or near 0. But unfortunately, you can see that as it reduces up to 0, your testing error kept also reducing. At a point, what happened? It started going back up. See, that is where you know where to stop. You know when to stop. At this point, you are going into overfitting. See? So up to this level, these are good news. Because as the training error kept reducing, your own training testing set was also going down. Even though training error went to 0, suddenly the testing error started going up. At that point, you have overfitted your system. It means you need to stop before you get to getting your testing error to increase again. And it will keep going on to be increasing. That is why you're going to have a situation whereby your training error is almost 0, but the error here is going to 30% error. That is overfitting. And this is the underfitting, why this is overfitting. That's what we're trying to explain. See? Now, so in between, so you need to know when to stop. Should I stop at this point? Or should I stop at this point? Just before, or I can manage to get to this level just before it goes up. We can see that as we try to bring bias down, variance is is increasing, but it's increasing to some level that's acceptable. But the moment you overkill, your training set went too complex, then you are going to lead to this particular kind of problem. So like I was saying, so we can see that we need to know when to stop before we go into that particular overfitting. That is the idea of bias-variance trade-off. So you just need to stop before things get out of hand. So people like to have training accuracy very high, but yes, but we don't really need to get 100% before your work is good. Because the moment you start getting 100% in your training set, you might be getting to this point that your testing accuracy will start going up again. Sorry, your testing error will start increasing. So up to this level, it is acceptable. So you stop. You don't overkill. Now, what are the ways to look into it? Still on the bias variance trade-off, another graph for us. Let's look at it. So one of the things you can try to see is when you have many training samples on the testing error, how can we work on our testing error? Because you don't know how your testing set is going to perform until after the training is done. So that is why your training must be in such a way that it doesn't create a model that is already going to overfit, that is going to perform on the training set, but the testing set is going to be difficult. So one way is to see that, okay, if you have many training samples, hopefully, you can see that this is testing error. This is testing error. So if you have many training samples, hopefully your performance on the training testing set will be reasonable. But when you have few training samples, the testing error is bound to be higher. This is one of the causes of the problem. This is why one of the solutions to overfitting is that you provide more data set to your system. During training, expose your algorithm to enough data samples in order to prevent overfitting from taking place. So experiments have been carried out, and this kind of graph is a well-established concept that if you have many training examples, for sure your testing set will likely look reasonable. Of course, to some level, if you go too complex, then problem could come in. However, when there are few data samples, generally, it's very much easier for the system not to perform. So it means the more the training samples, the more the training sample, the better. This is why one thing we advocate for is enough data set. The more the data, hopefully the better. But when the data are very few, this is risky when you build a model, because the system will not be able to expose itself to enough data to be able to perform on the testing set. Because the testing set is you have trained on a very small sample and you want the system to recognize new sample that it has never seen before. So it may perform on the training set, which is going to be overfitting, or you try to memorize it. Some models are good at that, but when you bring testing sets, they might not be able to actually perform. Now, so that's why we say the effect of training size, that is, and compared to the number of training examples. See, this is another way to look at it. You can see that one of the aim and objective of generalization is we want to bring the performance of training set and testing set as close together as possible. See, here is as we increase the number of training examples, this is the hypothetical case. This is the expected normal system we want to have. You can see that once the number of training examples are increased, that we hope that the testing performance and the training performance will try to merge together. This is why you can actually have 95% accuracy, performance accuracy for testing, for training to be 95, and sometimes you'll be able to have like 94% or so for testing. You can see that they're performing very close together. This is actually the expectation if the number of samples are very good, and the data also is favorable. You see, so the testing and the training accuracy we will try to converge at a point in time. You can see that, you can see here it goes. So you don't really try there to get zero. You don't really, it's better for you actually to have a training accuracy of 95%, and then you're able to get testing accuracy of 93 or 92. This is better than you having training accuracy of 100% and the performance on testing set goes to like 85. What is the benefit? It doesn't benefit, because our own target is the testing. the data that is coming from outside, we don't know this data sample. We don't know this sample. We don't know the person. Maybe we are predicting you have a securities surveillance that should predict who is coming to the house with high accuracy. So we are more concerned with the testing. When we are going to deploy our model for the client, how accurate is that model going to perform? So that is why sometimes you need to make some compromise to let your training set get a little bit of lower accuracy. Don't go to extreme complexity that it gets you 100% on training set, and the testing set, when you deploy it, the performance is going down, because this is what necessarily might actually happen. So, and one way to prevent this is supply enough training set. You can see as the number of training samples increases, the testing and training accuracy actually will try to converge. And you can see here, so between the testing sets and the training, between the testing accuracy and the training error, we have what we call the generalization error. So the term generalization error is what is the difference between the testing accuracy and the training accuracy? How close are they together? So we always want to minimize it. Like I just explained here, we don't want a system that will perform 100% on training set, but goes down for testing set. No, we want them to be close together. I rather prefer to have a system with 95% on training, 93% on testing. This is good. And by the way, it's possible for you to have actually 95% on training set, and you have 96% on testing. Yeah, we've had it before. In fact, but then it's in line with this idea. It was on number recognition, Arabic number recognition, with over 48,000 plus of the samples. So the system had enough data for training, enough for testing. At a point in time, I remember we got 99.something% accuracy for training, and we got 100% accuracy for testing. Very strange. Yeah, it's possible. This is actually what we want. You see, the system was able to recognize all the testing samples, but made a little mistake on the training samples. So we rather get this than getting a system with 100% training and lesser value for the testing. However, this is a very rare phenomenon to get. To get your training testing result to be better than training result is very challenging to get. But this is what we hope to get actually. And it is possible. Because some couple of friends recently, they got it and somebody was worried. Is it possible? I said, yes, it's possible. This is actually what we are aiming for. So we rather, you can see that the training error was like very low, because at this level it's overfitting actually. So when you supply more training examples, it takes your model away from overfitting. You can see. You see, because overfitting is that the generalization error between the testing set and the training set is too wide. The testing accuracy is almost zero. You can see the testing error here is almost zero, but the testing accuracy is testing error is very high. So the aim is that we want to bring down the error of testing. Even we might have to compromise the error of training, let the error of training increase. This is the idea. So at this level, the training error is now like maybe 5% error, and this one is having like 10% error. That's fine. So which means I have 95% accuracy, and this one is having 90% accuracy. That's good. So we want to reduce the difference between the testing performance and the training performance. And you are recommended to get this. It is recommended for you to increase the number of training samples to do that. And this is what we hope for. And this is the idea of what you have to do. I say, remember, no classifier is inherently better than any other. So you need to make assumptions to generalize. So this I've always mentioned in my lectures, that let the data speak. Let the data speak. When somebody talks about machine learning and tells you that the best machine learning algorithm is this, I say, no, that person doesn't understand the way machine learning works. No machine learning works in all situations. That's remind us here, there's no free lunch anywhere. Just imagine, say there's going to be free lunch here, you need $10 to enter that place. So are you going to eat up to $10? You actually pay the money directly. It means you are going to sacrifice some things. You see? So there's something we call no free lunch theorem. It's well explained in the machine learning system and some other areas. So there's nothing really free, actually, when you analyze what is underneath and what is involved. So you need to make sacrifice. You see? So you need to make sacrifice. So bias, variance, trade-off, you move towards reducing bias, but make sure you don't reduce it to the extent that variance becomes unacceptable, because that is overfitting. So as you are moving away from underfitting, you are moving towards overfitting. So this I want us to pay attention to very, very well. Very important. You see, here is underfitting, here is overfitting. As you run away from underfitting, you are moving towards overfitting. You have to balance up. Be middle course. That at the point I'm stopping, is it okay for me to stop at that particular point to make a good gain? So we said 3 kinds of error are available. So after mentioning that no classifier is always better, you need to make necessary assumptions so that you can improve the generalization ability. We've mentioned 3 kinds of error. The one that is inherent or unavoidable. We find it in the data set. That's why we always say, let the data speak. If your data is very noisy, it's very bad. Even if you bring the best algorithm there, you might still suffer from the system. See? So bias, you might actually, when you run into this kind of problem, it's better for you to actually try to work on your data set. When you work on, if you have very clean data, even the simplest of algorithm will give you good results. Because another principle in machine learning is keep it simple. Start with simple algorithm. Don't go for complicated algorithm. We're wasting time. You see, work on your data set rather. A simple algorithm will work for you rather than going for maybe ensemble, hybrid, and some other complicated systems. Of course, sometimes, even no matter how you work on your data set, the data set is just bad. Then you have to use complicated algorithm to see how you can get it solved. So bias is due to oversimplification. You think the problem is too simple. You didn't pay more attention to it. It's dangerous. Where variance is due to inability to perfectly estimate parameter from limited data. So if your data set is not really in favor of that, that could actually lead to a very big problem. So we try as much as possible to balance it up. So you cannot get zero, you might not be able to get zero bias, or I mean, to get very high bias or zero bias, because you reduce one, the other one increases. So try to be in between, as we have shown in the mean. Towards the end, we say, how do we fix high bias or high variance in the data set? We say high bias is due to a simple model. To fix this, we can do the following. 1, add more features or add more importance to the data. Add more complexity by introducing polynomial features. Decrease the regularization times. Add more data, or even you might need to change your algorithm, because high bias means your model has not really understood the data. You see? Either you add more feature, the feature present in the data set is not enough. Like just a few days ago, I had a case of student, and they had like 15 features. Without doing any feature selection, they decided to reduce it to 5. And they got stuck in an accuracy that they thought is not yet enough. So why did you kick out those other attributes? Bring them back. Because use your original data set. Don't go into feature selection right from the beginning. The principle is start with the complete feature. Then see your results. If the result is not good, what can I do? One way is to try to reduce the feature because of the principle under the concept of cost of dimensionality. So we've explained that concept before. We have the opportunity to explain again, inshallah, another time. So in cost of dimensionality, the more the number of features, the lesser the accuracy you might be getting. But then that doesn't mean that the moment you have a lot of features, you just need to kick them out. First of all, let the data speak. Run the experiment on that data. The result you are getting will tell you if you need to reduce the feature or not. Of course, there are other advantages of feature selection. But to just get data set 15 features and you start kicking them out to remain only 5, you might have actually sacrificed some feature that will help you to get good results. Because I've seen cases whereby the best result were gotten when you use all the 20 features. We try to reduce the feature. We never get anything to improve it. It means those features, they were collaborating with one another to get us good results. So when you run it underfitting, it means both the training set and testing set they are bad, which is high bias. Try to increase the number of features, get more features. Maybe you might need to change your algorithm. Maybe that algorithm is incompetent. to handle the kind of data set. However, when you have high variance, which is due to a model that's try to fit most of the training data set point and hence get more complex, which is overfitting. High variance is overtraining, memorizing the data point rather than understanding the concepts of the data set. To resolve high variance, which is overfitting, what do? Get more training sample to yourself. See, in grid regularization time, choose simpler algorithms, reduce input feature. You can see the opposite of what we did for the underfitting is what you do for when you have overfitting. You see, you reduce the input features, reduce the number of features for you. Maybe that is why you are having this not able to understand the testing data set. So, and try to get more training data. The more training data you expose your system to, the more it gives your system the opportunity to be able to understand the samples that will come later that are not part of the training set. And finally, so why bias and variance in machine learning is a very, very important concept. It helps us to avoid over and underfitting condition, and it helps us to be able to have consistency in prediction. So that you want your prediction to be consistent, you have to take care of these two very important concepts. That is why bias and variance trade-off is a very, very important concept, as actually it controls the performance, because you don't want a model that is underfitting, which means it doesn't understand the training set. It does not also understand the testing set. But overfitting is only understanding the training set, but not understanding the testing set. We don't want any of these cases, because our target is we want a system that can understand our testing set, which is the one that we are more interested in, as I said earlier. Of course, you cannot have a system that will understand the testing set if it doesn't understand the training set. It doesn't work that way. You see, you have a system that is having 30% accuracy on the training set. No, there's no way it's going to get 90% on testing. It's not possible, because it's already a failed system. But then when you have a system that is having like 95% accuracy on the training set, and suddenly it got like 93 for testing, that is celebration. Good, excellent. You can work more on it to push it to getting 99% on training, maybe 96 or 97 on testing. And sometimes you can get a kind of wonderful model that will get you 99% accuracy for training and 100% for testing. But this is very rare, but people do get it once in a while. But know that the idea is the performance accuracy between the training and the testing must be close together. This is the idea. They must be close together. One is getting 98 and that one is getting 96, 97 is good. But you got 100% for training and 55 for testing. That is unacceptable. That is overfitting. So bias and variance guides us to be able to understand this and to be able to avoid overfitting and underfitting and to have consistency in our prediction. So thank you very much. This is what we're going to have about bias and variance trade-off for the meantime. Thank you very much for the attendance, and I wish you all the best.